Don't you all see? We are not free men. The legendary Captain Hook is nothing more than a man built on lies and myth. His greatest claim is Neverland, which he couldn't even do on his own. We all know Varric killed Pan, not you. You twist history to your favor and wear the trappings of victory. What victories? You're no pirate. You're just a banner boy for the Mordanes.
Do you know what waters we're sailing through, Finn? Can you hear the faint singing against the tide? It's quite peaceful, yeah? Those are lies. Do you know what a mermaid does to a man? You assume the tales of the mermaid were a myth, just as you think of me. Now you'll see for yourself.
I'll take the sword. Please.
This is the man you wagered your lives on. Goodbye, Finn. Show our remaining mates their reward for courage. What is the status of our crew?
Quite a line, sir. We have received a raven from King Varric. He wants us back at Haven's Rock.
The worst mistake I ever made was partnering with that lifeless leech.
He wants you to lead his fleet on a southern assault.
Ah, yes. The other self-declared king. That boy Finn was not wrong. We are not pirates anymore. Just pawns on two men's chessboard. How am I to be remembered as the greatest pirate, the king over the seas, conqueror of Neverland, if I'm just some shit king's pawn?
What are you getting at, Captain?
Pull down the Mordain banners. This ship sails again under one flag.
This is not a decision we should make lightly.
A pirate is only as good as the tales after their death. The ones that echo for centuries. And I'll have the greatest one yet. I'm gonna kill both the kings.
Those are John Silver's banners.
There! Survivor!
What is your name, lass?
A ship. No sails. No oars. It sank beneath the waves like a beast. It was made of steel. Moving like a knife through the water.
So it's the cabin fever that's got you.
You're all doomed. You're all doomed!
Throw her in the brig! They have her! Captain, they have her!
Tinkerbell.
Change course for the City of Ash. It took me a minute, but there is only one red-haired dame known across the seas. Anne Bonny. Never thought much of John. Terrible name to begin with. Long John Silver. But I respected his determination. Did your crew ever find Treasure Island? Tell me, who attacked you last night?
Our ship was sinking before we saw anything. Cannons that traveled underwater. The ship rose from under the waves. It was black magic.
You'll stay with us for now, Anne Bonny. If this black magic vessel you speak of is true, I look for your insight on how to sink it.
There is no stopping it.
What I'm about to acquire today will make you think otherwise. God, I hate this place. What is the time, Shmi?
Ten past, Captain.
The legendary Captain Hook. It is an honor, sir. Gentlemen, there is no need to draw steel. We are here simply to discuss the terms of your surrender, to serve the true king of the seas and the realms of man, Captain Nemo.
So you're the ones behind John Silver's death?
Mr. Silver received the same offer. He refused. And consequences followed.
Did you kill my men?
I've killed none of your men, sir. I am here in service of Captain Nemo to broker a peaceful surrender and partnership.
I've grown quite tired of all these so-called kings.
Captain?
We need to go, now.
What about Tinkerbell?
Those pirates are dead. And this Nemo likely has her now. We need to regroup at Dead Man's Bay.
The first time the old woman pushed away a plate of food, nobody thought much of it. The second time, they worried. By the end of the third month, some of the best doctors in America had run out of answers, and a mansion that seemed to have everything had become a place filled with silent fear. In a sprawling estate overlooking the rolling hills outside Asheville, North Carolina, 78-year-old Margaret Whitaker sat by the same window every day, staring at a distant line of trees. She barely spoke. She barely slept. Most alarming of all, she barely ate. The woman who had once filled her home with laughter, homemade pies, and Sunday dinners for neighbors now turned away every meal placed before her. Her son, Jonathan Whitaker, was one of the wealthiest businessmen in the state. He owned successful construction companies, luxury hotels, and commercial properties across the country. Newspapers praised his achievements. Magazines featured his success story. Yet every evening, after meetings and business deals worth millions of dollars, he came home to a mother he could not save. Before we continue, if you believe kindness still matters, if you believe hope can appear when everything seems lost, and if you believe people deserve second chances, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these uplifting stories reach more hearts around the world. Jonathan had spent nearly every dollar necessary trying to help Margaret. Specialists from Boston, Chicago, and Los Angeles examined her. Nutrition experts developed meal plans. Therapists attempted to understand why she had withdrawn so deeply from life. Nothing worked. The diagnosis was always similar. Physically, Margaret was remarkably healthy for her age. There was no disease explaining her refusal to eat. Yet each day she grew weaker. The mansion staff became accustomed to seeing untouched plates returned to the kitchen. Perfectly prepared salmon, roasted vegetables, fresh bread, soups, desserts, everything came back untouched. The situation affected everyone who worked there. The housekeeper prayed for Margaret every morning. The gardener left flowers by her window. Even the security guards asked about her condition. Yet nothing changed. One rainy October morning, Jonathan stood in the massive kitchen staring at another untouched breakfast tray. His shoulders sagged beneath the weight of exhaustion. For the first time in years, the successful businessman looked defeated. The head chef, who had worked in five-star restaurants, quietly resigned 2 days later. He admitted he could no longer bear preparing meals that nobody would eat. Jonathan hired another chef. Then another. Each lasted only weeks. Then, shortly before Thanksgiving, a young woman named Rebecca Collins arrived at the estate seeking employment. Rebecca was 32 years old. She wasn't famous. She hadn't trained in prestigious culinary schools. Her resume was surprisingly ordinary compared to previous applicants. She had worked in church kitchens, family diners, retirement homes, and community centers throughout Tennessee and North Carolina. Most wealthy employers would have overlooked her application immediately. But Jonathan was desperate. When Rebecca entered the kitchen for her interview, she noticed something strange. The kitchen contained every luxury appliance imaginable. Copper cookware gleamed beneath bright lights. Marble countertops stretched endlessly. Yet despite all the beauty, the room felt sad. It felt like a place where people cooked food but had forgotten how to nourish hearts. Jonathan explained his mother's condition. Rebecca listened carefully. Most applicants had immediately discussed recipes, nutritional science, or culinary techniques. Rebecca asked only one question. She wanted to know what Margaret had been like before she stopped eating. The question caught Jonathan off guard. For several moments he simply stood there. Then memories began surfacing. He described a woman who loved family gatherings. A woman who volunteered at church. A woman who remembered every birthday in town. A woman who never allowed anyone to leave her house hungry. Rebecca listened quietly. The more Jonathan talked, the more emotional he became. Finally, he admitted something he had never told any doctor. Margaret's decline had begun shortly after the death of her husband, Samuel, 3 years earlier. Samuel and Margaret had been married for 55 years. After Samuel passed away, something inside Margaret seemed to fade. The doctors called it grief. Jonathan called it heartbreak. Rebecca accepted the job that afternoon. During her first week, she observed more than she cooked. She watched how Margaret sat by the window. She noticed the old photographs surrounding her room. She learned which songs Margaret occasionally hummed under her breath. She discovered that every evening at exactly 6 o'clock, Margaret glanced toward the dining room before looking away. Most importantly, Rebecca learned about Samuel. The staff spoke of him often. He had been kind, patient, and deeply devoted to his wife. Every Friday night for decades, Samuel had cooked dinner for Margaret. Not because he was a great chef. Because he loved making her smile. As Thanksgiving approached, Rebecca began forming a theory. The issue wasn't food. The issue was loneliness. The mansion was beautiful but empty. Margaret wasn't starving because she disliked eating. She was starving because every meal reminded her of someone missing. The realization broke Rebecca's heart. On Thanksgiving morning, while the rest of America prepared family feasts, Margaret sat alone near her window. Jonathan planned to spend the holiday with her, but urgent business matters delayed his return. The mansion felt unusually quiet. Rebecca entered the kitchen before sunrise. Instead of preparing an elaborate gourmet meal, she chose something simple. Very simple. She began making dishes from recipes she had discovered in an old handwritten notebook belonging to Margaret. Chicken and dumplings. Cornbread. Green beans seasoned the old-fashioned way. Apple cobbler. Nothing fancy. Nothing expensive. Just food that felt like home. As the aromas drifted through the mansion, something unusual happened. Margaret slowly lifted her head. For the first time in months, she looked curious. The scent wasn't coming from a professional chef's cookbook. It smelled like memories. It smelled like family. Rebecca continued cooking throughout the afternoon. But she wasn't finished. Using information gathered from staff members, she decorated the dining room to resemble photographs from Margaret and Samuel's early years together. She placed fresh flowers on the table. She found old jazz records Samuel loved. She dimmed the lights softly. Nothing extravagant. Just warm. Just welcoming. Just human. As evening arrived, Rebecca approached Margaret gently and invited her to dinner. Nobody expected success. Every previous attempt had failed. Margaret slowly entered the dining room. She paused. The room looked familiar. The music stirred forgotten memories. The food smelled like decades of family gatherings. For a long moment she simply stood there. Then tears filled her eyes. Not dramatic tears. Quiet tears. The kind that emerge when someone remembers a life once filled with love. Rebecca sat nearby, giving her space. No pressure. No lectures. No demands. Just companionship. Margaret looked at the plate before her. Her hands trembled slightly. The entire staff watched discreetly from a distance. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Finally, Margaret picked up a spoon. One bite. That was all. Just one bite. But in that moment, it felt like a miracle. Several staff members began crying. The housekeeper covered her mouth. The gardener wiped away tears. When Jonathan arrived later that evening and learned what had happened, he rushed to the dining room. There sat his mother. A small portion of food remained on her plate. For most families, it would have seemed insignificant. For Jonathan, it was the most beautiful sight he had witnessed in years. The following morning, Margaret ate again. Not much. But enough. Then the next day. And the day after that. Progress came slowly. Some days were better than others. Yet something important had changed. Hope had returned. Over the following weeks, Rebecca spent time with Margaret beyond the kitchen. They looked through old photo albums. They baked cookies together. They attended church services. They spoke about Samuel. Rather than avoiding painful memories, Rebecca encouraged Margaret to honor them. She helped her understand that loving someone deeply didn't mean life ended when they were gone. Love could continue through memories, kindness, and purpose. Christmas arrived with fresh snow covering the hills around the estate. For the first time in years, Margaret joined the family celebration. Her smile remained fragile, but it was real. Jonathan couldn't remember the last time he had seen that expression. One evening after Christmas, Margaret revealed something that shocked everyone. For months she had felt invisible. People focused on making her eat but rarely asked why she stopped. Doctors monitored symptoms. Experts measured nutrition. Everyone wanted to fix her. Few wanted to understand her. Rebecca had been different. She had seen the person behind the problem. That realization transformed Jonathan as well. He began spending less time at the office and more time with his mother. Business success suddenly seemed less important than family. He cancelled unnecessary meetings. He joined Margaret for breakfast. He listened to stories he had heard 100 times before. And somehow those stories sounded different now. They sounded precious. Spring arrived, bringing color back to the gardens. Margaret's strength gradually returned. She began walking outside again. She planted flowers. She volunteered at church once more. Neighbors who hadn't seen her in years were amazed by the transformation. Many assumed expensive medical treatment had solved the problem. The truth was far simpler. Healing began when someone chose compassion over expertise. Months later, Jonathan organized a community dinner at the local church. Hundreds attended. Families gathered around long tables filled with homemade food. Near the end of the evening, Jonathan stood before the crowd and shared his gratitude. He spoke about wealth, success, and achievement. Then he admitted that none of those things had helped when his mother needed saving. What ultimately made the difference was a person willing to care. A person willing to listen. A person willing to see what others overlooked. Rebecca sat quietly among the guests, embarrassed by the attention. But everyone stood and applauded. Not because she was a remarkable cook. Because she had reminded an entire community of something important. People do not survive on food alone. They survive on connection. On purpose. On love. As years passed, the story spread throughout the region. Visitors often asked Margaret what meal finally brought her back. They expected a recipe. A secret ingredient. Some special culinary technique. Margaret always smiled and gave the same answer. The meal itself mattered far less than the heart behind it. What she tasted that evening wasn't merely chicken and dumplings. She tasted kindness. She tasted understanding. She tasted hope. And sometimes, those are the ingredients people need most. Before we reach the ending, I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below and tell us about someone whose kindness changed your life when you needed it most. Your story may encourage another person who is struggling today. Several years later, on a warm summer evening, Margaret sat on her porch watching the sunset paint the North Carolina sky in shades of gold and crimson. Rebecca was there beside her. Jonathan was there too. Laughter drifted through the yard where neighbors and friends gathered for another community meal. The table overflowed with food. But what made the moment beautiful wasn't what was being served. It was who was sharing it. Margaret looked around at the people she loved and realized something profound. Grief had once convinced her that her best days were behind her. Love had proven otherwise. The pain of loss never completely disappeared, but it no longer controlled her life. Instead, it became part of a larger story, one filled with gratitude, faith, friendship, and new beginnings. And if this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes in compassion, and subscribe for more uplifting stories. Every act of support helps spread messages of hope to people who may need them today. As the sun slipped below the horizon, Margaret bowed her head quietly and whispered a prayer of thanks, not for the wealth surrounding her, but for the people who had stayed beside her when life felt darkest. Because in the end, the greatest miracle in that mansion was never the dinner that finally made her eat again. It was the simple truth that one caring person can change the direction of another person's life. Sometimes healing begins not with medicine, money, or answers, but with a warm meal, a listening ear, and a heart willing to sit down at the table and stay.